Let's imagine we've just entered the new year and you've decided that this is the year that you turn your life around. So you set some big goals and your motivation is through the roof. Then fast forward a few weeks and that motivation that felt limitless is gone and you've fallen back into your old habits or routines without even realizing it. Sound familiar? If you've experienced this, then you've probably just blamed the failure on a lack of discipline or motivation. But that's probably not what caused you to fail. It was more likely a misunderstanding of how to make sticking to your habits so easy that you can't fail. In this video, we will cover 3 rules that will almost guarantee that you stick to your new habits. But first, you might be wondering why you should even listen to me instead of the thousands of other videos from much more successful people. And well, my answer is because I'm just a normal, average guy that most of you could probably relate to. These tips come from my real experience. They're simple, practical, and can be used by anyone. I'm not trying to build a hyper-successful business. I'm not trying to compete in an Ironman, and I'm not trying to be the most disciplined guy ever. So this video is for those of you that just want to make some positive changes to your life without being told to just be more disciplined. If you're still here, then let's get to the first rule. All right, so rule number 1 is to choose the right habits. And I'm calling these rules, but really they're just recommendations, so pick and choose what you like. But so a big mistake that was preventing me from sticking to my habits was simply just choosing ones that weren't the right fit. If you choose habits that are the right fit for you, it's going to take much less discipline to actually stick to them. So how do we even know if a habit is the right fit for us? Well, I would try and make sure that it actually aligns with the person you want to become. So picture the person that you do want to be. What kind of habits would they have? For example, if the person you want to become really values health, they would probably have some kind of daily walking habit or some type of movement. I personally think it's a good idea to avoid choosing habits that involve activities that you hate. Try and find some satisfaction or enjoyment from your habit. I have found it really hard to continue to push myself to do things that I just don't want to do, and I'm never consistent when I try and do that. There's always a workaround though. So let's say you wanted to read more, but you hate reading. Then a better option might be to listen to an audiobook on the way to and from work. If you wanted to do more cardio, but you find running unbearable, then maybe a better habit would be to pick up the sport or have a different form of cardio like cycling. I'm not saying that you need to love your habit, but you definitely need to at least tolerate it. Otherwise, it's going to be way harder to be consistent because you're always going to be fighting the resistance towards doing it. Another effective way to choose the right habits for you is to set some goals that you really want to achieve. Then you can break that down into smaller daily or weekly habits. For example, if your goal was to run 20 kilometers a month, then maybe you would break that down into a weekly habit of doing a 5-kilometer run each week. If you wanted to read a book each month, then maybe you would set a daily reading time that would allow you to finish a book a month. Having a clear goal in mind will give you a good idea of what habits you should choose, because that's how you're going to achieve it. Just make sure you don't set the goal without any plan or any habits to actually get there. James Clear, the author of Atomic Habits, explains this perfectly with this analogy, which I've summarized a little bit. Imagine a small rowboat. Your goals are like the rudder on the boat. They set the direction and determine where you go. However, there is another part of the boat that is even more important than the rudder, the oars. If the rudder is your goal, then the oars are your process or habits for achieving it. While the rudder determines your direction, it is the oars that determine your progress. So the goal is the destination and the habits are how you get there. My final recommendation on this would be to only choose a few habits at once. Personally, I've had a lot more success when only trying to focus on a few habits. The times where I tried to do a complete overhaul of my life and change my morning and nightly routine completely, I just wasn't able to stick to them, and I found that I was trying to make too much of a significant change to my life, and I would end up just falling back into my old routine. So my advice would be to just choose a few habits that will make the most impact on your life. A quick summary of those points is to choose habits that align with the person you want to be, set some goals and break them down, pick habits that you at least tolerate doing, and lastly, only pick a few and make sure they're the ones that would have the most impact on your life. Rule number 2 is make the habits easy. So we've covered how to choose the right habits. Now let's talk about the hard part, which is staying consistent. A few mistakes I've made in the past was making my habits too difficult, too time-consuming, or too hard to remember. When they were too difficult, it would create a lot of resistance towards actually doing the habit, and that was hard to push past. Usually I could be consistent for about a week or two, and then I would just start making any excuse to not do them. When the habit was too hard to remember, I often just forgot to do it entirely. To avoid this, I have 2 recommendations, both of which I learned in the book Atomic Habits. First is to use the 2-minute rule. This is where you scale down your habit until it can be done in under 2 minutes. And although that might sound a bit pointless, the goal for this method is to make the habit as easy as possible to start and to stick to. If the habit's too difficult, it's unlikely that we will actually stick with it long enough for it to become an ingrained part of our routine. Once it feels natural to do the habit every day, then we can improve it. Learning this idea was a breakthrough for me. I was able to make every habit so easy to do that I really couldn't justify any excuse to not do them. A few examples of how I applied this principle to my own habits was I wanted to read more, so I began by reading 1 page a day. I wanted to improve my mobility, so I began by stretching for 2 minutes each morning. I wanted to begin journaling, so at the end of the day before bed, I would just write 1 or 2 sentences about my day. And fast forward to now, I'm able to do all those things and more easily with no resistance. Now, to make sure that you actually remember to do your habits, I would suggest trying to make changes to your environment to make the habits more obvious. Having a few visual reminders is going to make it way easier to be consistent. So if you wanted to read before bed, maybe you'd keep your book on the bedside table. If you wanted to work out as soon as you got home, maybe you'd leave your gym clothes next to the door or somewhere where you would see them straight away. I really like this idea of making changes to your environment to make desired habits easier and unwanted habits harder. If there was habits that you wanted to remove or that prevented you from doing your desired habit, you could make them more difficult to do. For example, if late night scrolling stops you from reading at night, maybe you would set an app timer that would lock you out of those apps when it was time to go to bed. If eating sweets or other snacks was keeping you from your goal of being healthy, then removing those from your environment entirely will make it much harder to do that. To summarize those points, first, use the 2-minute rule to make your habits as easy as possible to start and stick to. Then, once they're part of your routine, try and improve on them. And second is to shape your environment to make your desired habits easier and your unwanted habits harder. Rule number 3 is track them. So we know how to choose the right habits, we know how to make them easier to start and stick to. All that's left is to do them consistently. To make this as easy as possible, you need to use a habit tracker. Doing so will provide you a visual reminder and give you an objective insight of your consistency. A big mistake I've made in the past was trying to just rely on my memory and hope that I would remember to do my habits. And as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the time I would just forget. Even if I thought I was doing well, I didn't really have an objective view of whether that was true or not. So I didn't know if I was being consistent. Most of us are so busy with our day-to-day lives that it can be really difficult to make any changes or implement any new habits unless we are paying real attention to what we are doing every day. Now, you might be resisting the idea of using a habit tracker, which would be fair because it's another habit that you have to implement and think about each day. But it can be really easy if you keep it simple. There are so many good options out there, including apps that will even send you push notifications to complete your habits. I'll leave a link in the description for the video that inspired my current habit tracker that I use, but you can do it however you want. In the start, what I would do is I would just write out the days of the week and then each habit that I wanted to complete next to it. This whole process took me like 2 minutes to set up, if that, and then like 30 seconds a day to fill out. So it can be a really quick, simple, and effective tool to keep you on top of your habits. So hopefully that's enough convincing. I'm definitely very passionate about this because it changed my life and it could change yours too. One last piece of advice though, is if you are going to start using a habit tracker, don't try to be perfect. Just be honest when you do and don't complete your habits, and use this as more of a guide or a tool to help you improve your consistency over time. Okay, so those are all the things that I try and do to help me stay consistent with my habits without just relying on discipline, because discipline is definitely difficult. So hopefully that has been a bit of help to some of you. If you have anything that you do yourself that helps you keep on top of your habits, or if you have any advice or any extra things to add, I would love to hear about them in the comments. But thank you for watching.